Welcome to Ideas and Insights, a show devoted to exploring novel perspectives and contemporary issues. I am Badrinath Rao, your host. Self-improvement, a quintessentially American preoccupation, has now transcended borders to become a global phenomenon. It's based on the notion that we are imperfect and inadequate, driving us to relentlessly pursue perfection for a competitive edge. In the United States alone, self-improvement is a staggering $11 to $13 billion industry. The global wellness economy, reflecting this worldwide pursuit, is currently valued at $4.5 trillion. We've internalized the idea that, like computers, we must be constantly updated. This obsession fuels the proliferation of courses, workshops, training programs, self-help books, videos, life coaches, and social media apps, all aimed at producing a better version of ourselves. If you're not part of this global movement, you might be considered lazy, dumb, or both. The advent of digital tools and AI has only augmented this craze. But amidst this brouhaha, a fundamental question remains. Is our self-improvement mania healthy? Does it truly make us better human beings? Or are we becoming unwitting victims of a culture of narcissism? If so, are there saner ways of improving ourselves? These are the questions I'll be exploring with Professor Mark Coeckleberg, Professor of Philosophy of Media and Technology at the University of Vienna in Austria. He is the author of Self-Improvement, Technologies of the Soul in the Age of Artificial Intelligence, published by Columbia University Press in 2022. Professor Coeckleberg joins me now to discuss his ideas further. Welcome to Ideas and Insights, Professor Coeckleberg. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, it's a pleasure.
Your book offers a searing indictment of this whole idea of self-improvement. You say that self-improvement is a personal and cultural disease in our times, that it is a relentless quest for perfection and a phenomenon that leads to self-loathing and frustration. We will come to these criticisms in detail momentarily. But let me ask you a preliminary question. As you know well, all of us have imperfections that we are grappling with. Some have the problem of procrastination, some cannot focus, some others have relationship issues. And the preferred antidote to these personal inadequacies is self-improvement. My question to you, Professor Coeckleberg, is you don't have a problem with such innocuous forms of self-improvement, do you?
No, I don't. I mean, I don't have a problem with self-improvement as such. I think it's a great idea to try to improve yourself. And generally, many people around us are always ready to remind us of our imperfections. And I think it's a good thing to work on them. I think what I really am against is a particular form of self-improvement, which I think is today very problematic, and that's what the book is about.
We will get to the problematic aspects of self-improvement that you discuss so elaborately in your book in a little while. Let's begin first with the concept of self in self-improvement. You have traced the evolution of this term from the earliest times to our own age. And you have discussed the ideas of the Stoics, the Greek philosophers, the social theorists that came much later, Marx, Max Weber. You also discuss Rousseau, the existentialists, Jean-Paul Sartre, and you end by talking about how this notion of self got crystallized in our own time and has now become mediated by AI and technologies. The upshot of all of this, you point out, Professor Coeckleberg, is that we now have an understanding of the self that requires us to upgrade it every so often. Self is something that needs to be maintained, upgraded constantly. My question to you, Professor, is how did we get to this understanding of the self, and what are its implications?
Mhm. Yes, that's a long history, of course, the history of thinking about the self. In the book, I briefly sketched that history, and it starts with the ancient Greeks in Western culture, and the ancient Greeks had the idea that you have to know yourself. So what they were after was the good life. How can you live a good life? And meaning a life that's good for yourself, but also that is ethically sound. And they asked the question like, yeah, how can we know ourselves? But they didn't really mean what we in modern times mean by self and by self-improvement. For them, it was a lot about knowing what humans are, knowing human weaknesses, trying to perfect oneself also later in the Christian times. And yeah, having all kind of techniques for dealing with the self. For example, the ascetic techniques to try to not desire something, or at least to deal with your desire in such a way that you control yourself. And then later, only in modern times, people got really interested in who am I? What kind of individual am I? What kind of person am I? And Rousseau is an important figure there, who for the first time wanted to be himself, wanted to attain authenticity. This is a very modern thing to do, wasn't there in the ancient times. And that has influenced and shaped our contemporary culture, where we still try to be authentic, still look for who we are, what we are, and who we want to be. And that is in turn influenced by people like Nietzsche and Sartre, who said, like, don't look at the tradition anymore for what you are, who you want to be. You have to make yourself. And by itself, that was an interesting idea, and there's a lot of value in it. But this was then used and misused by what I call the self-improvement industry, which tries to sell us all kind of commercial and technological solutions to shape that self. And it's that kind of self-conception, that's shaped by those particular technologies, by those commercial interests. It's that self-conception that I criticize.
I will come to the issue that you flagged just now, namely the exploitation of this idea of self-improvement by big business. But prior to that, I have a quick follow-up to the earlier question I asked. From the trajectory that you have delineated in your book, I get the impression that we started with a focus on oneself, which was what the Stoics were known for. They said, look inward, don't concern yourself anything that's outside your scope of influence. In other words, there was a solipsistic element at play, where you said that the self alone is true and all else is false. Now, if we look at how this idea has evolved, we have come to a neo-Stoic perspective, as you point out. And that to me is very interesting, that we are again at the point where we are saying that we should focus exclusively on ourselves, albeit for very different reasons now, but the focus is nevertheless the same. You look inwards, but you say that one must look outward in order to improve oneself in a genuine manner. Is that a fair characterization of what you're saying?
Yeah, I think that's fair. It's an inward turn, but not an inward turn like the ancients did, because even that turn was still connected with the outside, with what they thought was the world, with the divine, and so on. And what we have to do in modern times today, we have this turn to the self against society, a society which is, since Rousseau, seen as threatening, as a kind of harsh world. And we have a disinterest in matters that are common, a disinterest in collective issues. And towards the end of the book, I really criticize this turn away from politics, turn away from the wider world, and the focus on the self. Now, on the one hand, I understand that kind of turn, because we are in a sort of multiple crisis, right? A poly crisis. We are in a world that is sometimes difficult to understand, and definitely difficult to influence, at least as an individual. And so I understand this turn, but at the same time, this turn also then leads to very concrete political consequences, and to a situation where we are too individualist, I think, too much concerned with ourselves and too little with others, and a situation where we deny that who and what we are is a relational matter, is actually something that depends on others. So others are not necessarily hell, as Sartre said, but others are also there to support us, to shape who we are, and that's not necessarily a bad thing.
You are absolutely right. We will come to this notion of the relational self in a little while. Let's stay for now on the aberrations that have come in the wake of a distorted sense of self. And one of the aberrations that you flag, which to me is an interesting part of your book, has to do with this idea of wellness capitalism that you discuss in your book. Now, wellness capitalism is a reference to the ploy by capitalists to monetize the inadequacies of people and say that there are strategies to fix your inadequacies. And in the process, of course, they are diverting attention away from the larger socio-economic, cultural, and political challenges that people are engulfed with. More importantly, you say that all of this, i.e. the machinations of wellness capitalism, has led to the commodification of the self. Tell us how wellness capitalism emerged, and why has it become so very potent in terms of the awesome profits it generates and the success it has had in getting people to accept its ideology, if you will.
Yes, so what happened is that in industrial society, basically the focus was on trying to monetize goods, producing goods and monetizing them. And so one could say that there was some kind of interest in the bodily and external aspects of the human, and trying to make profit of that. But then gradually, through the development of the human and psychological sciences, but also through gathering much more data about people, especially with the contemporary technologies, it's now possible for that very commercial culture and that capitalist culture to invade also the self, and to use our insecurities, use our most secret desires to try to sell us products and to try to make profit of us. And this is also, this is true for consumers, but it's also true for workers. The idea is that there's some kind of paternalistic idea that, take care of yourself, but taking care of yourself is not for the sake of you, but for the sake of you being a good worker and a good consumer. And so we are given some superficial means of achieving wellness, but we're not really improving ourselves. We're just becoming the ideal consumers and the ideal producers of data for the new economy.
If wellness capitalism is one of the aberrations that have emerged in the wake of our quest for self-improvement, the other equally disturbing challenge you point out in the book comes from the advent of digital technologies and artificial intelligence. You have eloquently argued that these technologies quantify ourselves, they continuously assess, evaluate, quantify all our attempts to improve ourselves. They collect data about our activities without our knowledge, and they monetize these assets to great advantage. So the idea now is that we have a quantified self coming to us in the wake of digital technologies. How has this idea of a quantified self distorted our understanding of who we are, and what can we do to set right this anomaly?
That's a very good question. So yeah, the new information technologies, data sciences, AI, and so on have enabled to analyze a lot of data about us and to penetrate in that psychology and in that intimate world of us, and in this way found new ways of making money, a new kind of capitalism. And this means that today that although we are giving the impression that we're improving ourselves, for example, through devices that track our heart rate and our route when we are sporting, or devices that follow up our medical condition. At first sight, these devices, they seem to give us some more information about us. At first sight, they seem to be helpful in supporting getting better, getting better shape, monitoring our health. But at the same time, those data are taken from us and they're used for all kinds of purposes. And they're especially used to make money. They're sold to third parties. There are all kinds of surveillance issues related to that. All these big companies know a lot about us. And so without that we realize it, we're really in a kind of nearly totalitarian system where we also at the same time do not really know ourselves, but only have those patterns in data. So what we get then is a kind of, we come to understand ourselves in this way as producers of data, as a collection of statistics basically. And we forget that there is this more deeper and ancient quest which we can connect to by reading books, by going back in time, also by listening to sources of indigenous knowledge and in other ways. But unfortunately, this is usually not happening. We are in this kind of new economy. We're used, and we get more and more tired and burned out without having a chance to really find self-knowledge and find ourselves.
A related challenge that you flag in the context of the rise of digital technologies is this subtle shift from self-improvement to self-enhancement. With the rise of biotechnologies and AI, the new focus now, as you point out in your book, is toward self-enhancement. And you also posit that we will soon get to a point where using AI, we can resort to moral enhancement. To me, this is quite intriguing because what started out as humanistic self-improvement has morphed into something completely different. It has now become technology-driven transhumanism. How did this transition occur, and where do you see this going?
Mm-hmm. Yes, in humanistic culture, for example, in the Renaissance, and also later, when books became more democratized, more available to everyone, the idea was that you work on yourself through reading, also talking to other people. And nowadays, what happens is that you get more and more this culture of, not only you're not good enough, but also you have to improve yourself by using technologies, or rather other technologies. One could say that a book is a kind of technology, a medium. But nowadays, the new technologies, AI and others, are used to improve ourselves. And this is quite a difference from how we use technology, because technology used to be applied to that external relation we have towards nature. But now the technologies are applied to the human mind, applied to the self, are applied to that quest of self-improvement. And by always stressing that we are not good enough as individuals and as humans, the technology is presented as the only way out. So also as a species, we're seen as not good enough. Humans are, instead of in the humanistic times where there was this ideal of the human becoming fully human, perfect yourself in that way was the idea. Now the human is not good enough anymore. And the idea is rather that we should, as humanity, morph into something superhuman, something transhuman. And that's quite a shift from accepting the human condition to basically radically changing it. So what Sartre said, like making ourselves, I think, has been radicalized and interpreted in a very technological way, and in a very sort of impoverished way.
Let's now turn to the last part of your book, where you offer solutions to the challenges that have come in the wake of our obsession with self-improvement. And interestingly, after having provided a masterful critique of all the issues that have emerged in the wake of distorted narcissistic self-improvement, you still affirm your faith in it, albeit qualifying your faith by saying that we must have self-improvement, but not in the form in which it is today. On the other hand, I mean, you provide an alternative, and you make two interesting points. You say that we must develop a more nuanced idea of the self and understand it as relational, something that is not static but is a story, and it's part of what you call the narrative identity. So that's the first thing, the notion of a relational self, which I thought was very interesting. And then you say that you don't have to focus morbidly on yourself. You want to enhance yourself, improve yourself, change society. Can you please briefly tell us why you think changing society is important, and why you think that developing this idea of relational self is critical for changing how we view self-improvement?
Mm-hmm. Yes, you said I'm not against self-improvement as such, and so what's needed is rather to leave that narcissistic focus And in order to do that, I think there are these two paths. One is to acknowledge the relationality of the self, acknowledge that we are always dependent on others and also dependent in the end on our natural environment, on ecosystems on this planet. That's one way of, instead of turning inward, turning outward. And a second way has to do with, turning towards those political and social issues that shape this whole situation in which we are, and which gives this toxicity to self-improvement. And so that means that that I argue for social and political change as the only way to make sure that we are in an environment that shapes us in a different way. Because if you really take seriously that relational self, it means that what I am is also what the environment is, and vice versa. So you can't change the parts if you can't change the whole. So if we work on changing the whole also, on political and social change, then there is more chance that we can arrive at a better form of self-improvement, and a form that is in line with our humanity and our deep relationality as humans.
So if I've understood you correctly, Professor Coeckleberg, you seem to be suggesting that this pursuit of self-improvement has to go on at two levels. One is the individual level, where you pursue self-improvement in meaningful ways and in ways that can have political significance. And then there is a larger, more diffused form of self-improvement that is anchored in political, social, and cultural challenges of our times. Thank you so much, Professor Coeckleberg, for spending time with us and sharing your views. It's been a pleasure talking to you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure.
That's it for today. Join us next week for a new episode of Ideas and Insights. We would love to hear from you about this episode. You can email us at ideasandinsights@wgte.org. Remember, you can access Ideas and Insights anytime by visiting our website, wgte.org/ideas and insights. Thanks for joining us today. We will see you next week. Until then, goodbye.